The words hit harder than any physical punch could have. "Dad, why are you so lazy?" My 9-year-old daughter Emma's innocent question hung in the air of our living room, while her 12-year-old brother Jake nodded in silent agreement. I sat there in my usual spot on the couch, laptop balanced precariously on my growing belly, trying to finish some code for a deadline. The TV droned on in the background, my constant companion during work-from-home days. At 39, I, Marcus Anderson, had become exactly what I never wanted to be. A stereotype, the overweight software developer, living on energy drinks and takeout, my exercise limited to the walk between my desk and the refrigerator. At 285 pounds, I had to catch my breath just from climbing the stairs to tuck my kids into bed. The worst part, I couldn't even argue with Emma's assessment. My wife Sarah had tried to be supportive, gently suggesting evening walks or weekend bike rides. But I always had an excuse. After this project, when things slow down at work, once the weather gets better. The list was endless, and we both knew they were just that, excuses. The turning point wasn't just Emma's question, it was what happened the next day at our family dinner. Jake was excitedly telling us about his soccer practice, demonstrating some moves right there in the dining room. "Dad, can you come to my game this Saturday? Coach says I might start." The pride in his voice was unmistakable. Of course I said yes, how could I not? But then came the gut punch. "But Dad, you have to promise to actually come to the field. Last time you just sat in the car because you said it was too hot to walk to the bleachers." That night, after the kids were in bed, I found myself in our home office, staring at family photos on the wall. There I was, getting progressively larger in each year's Christmas picture. But it was a particular photo that broke me, one from just 3 years ago, where I was actually playing soccer with Jake in our backyard. What had happened to that dad? For the first time in years, I did something I'd neglected for too long. I prayed. Not a formal prayer, not even a particularly eloquent one, just a desperate father's plea. "God, I can't be this person anymore. I don't want my kids to remember me as the lazy dad who couldn't even walk to their games. Please help me change." Little did I know that this simple prayer, offered in the quiet of my office, surrounded by the evidence of my gradual decline, would mark the beginning of a transformation that would shock not only my family, but our entire community. Our family had always been semi-regular church attendees at Grace Community Chapel, the kind that showed up on Easter, Christmas, and maybe once a month in between. Sarah was more committed than I was, often taking the kids to Sunday school while I caught up on work. The truth was I had grown uncomfortable in the church pews. They weren't made for someone my size, and I constantly felt like I was taking up too much space. The Sunday after my prayer, something compelled me to go. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was divine intervention, but I found myself sitting in the back row trying to be inconspicuous, which is hard when you're 6'2" and 285 pounds. That's when I first noticed Pastor Mike really looking at me, not with judgment but with something else, recognition maybe. I would later learn why. Sarah squeezed my hand when she saw me slide into the pew, her green eyes lighting up with surprise and hope. Jake and Emma were less subtle. "Dad, you came," Emma stage whispered, loud enough to make several heads turn. Jake tried to play it cool, but I caught his small smile. After the service, while I was trying to make a quick escape, Pastor Mike caught up with me. He was a tall, fit man in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and laugh lines around his eyes. "Marcus, right? Sarah's husband?" He fell into step beside me. "I noticed you during the sermon. Actually, I've been praying for you." I must have looked surprised because he quickly added, "Sarah mentioned during prayer group that she was worried about your health." Before I could feel betrayed by this revelation, he continued, 3 years ago, I was exactly where you are. 300 pounds, type 2 diabetes knocking at my door, and a congregation that was too polite to say anything but too worried not to notice." His words stopped me in my tracks. This fit, athletic-looking pastor used to be like me. That's when I noticed something else. He was wearing a marathon finisher's shirt under his jacket. "Look," he said, handing me his card, "I host a small group on Wednesday nights. It's not your typical Bible study. We call it Temple Builders. It's for people who want to honor God by taking care of their physical health. No pressure, but if you're interested." He let the invitation hang in the air. It took me 3 weeks to work up the courage to attend Temple Builders. 3 weeks of that business card burning a hole in my wallet. 3 weeks of Jake asking if I'd come to soccer practice yet. 3 weeks of Emma's hopeful looks every time I got up from the couch. When I finally walked into the church basement that Wednesday evening, I almost turned around and left. The room was full of people in workout clothes, and here I was in my XXL polo and khakis. But Pastor Mike spotted me before I could escape. "Marcus, you made it!" His genuine enthusiasm made several others turn and smile in welcome. That's when I noticed something surprising. Not everyone was fit. There were people of all sizes, all clearly at different stages of their journeys. The meeting started with prayer, but what followed wasn't what I expected. No fire and brimstone about gluttony, no lecture about clean eating. Instead, Pastor Mike talked about something that hit home. Your body is a gift from God, and like any gift, how we use it shows our gratitude to the giver. The real challenges began the next day. Pastor Mike had paired me with James, a member who was 6 months ahead of me on his journey, as my accountability partner. The plan seemed simple enough. Start with daily 15-minute walks, drink water instead of energy drinks, and show up to 3 meetings a week, 2 for exercise, 1 for spiritual support. Simple, until I tried to actually do it. The first walk nearly broke me. 15 minutes felt like an eternity, and the Texas summer heat was merciless. I came home drenched in sweat, my knees aching, feeling worse than when I started. Sarah tried to encourage me, but I snapped at her. "This is ridiculous. I'm a grown man. I shouldn't be celebrating walking around the block like it's some kind of achievement." Work didn't help. A major project was behind schedule, and my team was pulling long hours. The vending machine called my name during late nights at the office. My old habits offered comfort in the stress, and every time I gave in, the guilt grew stronger. Maybe this is just who I am, I thought during one particularly bad night, 3 empty Red Bulls on my desk. Maybe some people just aren't meant to change. The worst moment came during my 3rd week. I had managed to stick to the walking routine, even started enjoying it a little. Then Jake asked to join me. Excited by his interest, I pushed myself to go faster, keep up with his young legs. Halfway through, my chest tightened and I had to stop, gasping for air. The look of worry on my son's face crushed me. "Dad, are you okay?" he asked, his hand on my back. I wasn't having a heart attack, just severely out of shape, but the fear in his voice haunted me. That night, I sat in my car outside the church, debating whether to go into the temple builders meeting. I had failed at the simple task of walking with my own son. What was the point? As I reached for the ignition, ready to drive away, my phone buzzed. A text from James. "Don't even think about skipping. Remember Philippians 3:14. I press on toward the goal." I sat there for a long moment, key in hand, at war with myself. The changes in my life started creating ripples I hadn't expected. At work, my decision to take actual lunch breaks instead of eating at my desk raised eyebrows. My team had grown used to my constant availability, my willingness to sacrifice personal time for project deadlines. When I started leaving at 5:30 for temple builders meetings, my project manager, Dave, pulled me aside. "Marcus, the team's concerned about your commitment level," he said, gesturing to my empty chair during a late-night coding session. "This health kick is great and all, but we've got deliverables." The old me would have immediately backed down, promised to skip my workout, ordered a pizza, and stayed late. Instead, I heard Pastor Mike's voice in my head. "Your priorities reflect your values." "Dave," I replied, surprising myself with my steadiness. "I'm still delivering my work, but I'm also delivering on a promise to my family and myself." He didn't look happy, but something in my tone must have convinced him I wasn't backing down. At home, other challenges emerged. Our kitchen needed a complete overhaul. Sarah supported my changes but struggled with the practical aspects. Grocery bills went up as we bought more fresh food, and meal prep took longer than our usual microwave dinners. Emma complained about the new snacks, missing her chips and cookies. Jake, though proud of my efforts, was embarrassed when I showed up sweaty from a walk to pick him up from school. The most unexpected challenge came from well-meaning church members. Sister Margaret, who'd been bringing her famous sugar-laden cakes to every church function for 30 years, took personal offense when I politely declined a slice. "A little cake never hurt anyone," she insisted. "God gave us these pleasures to enjoy." Her words echoed my own justifications from the past, making them all the more dangerous. Even my prayer life felt the tension. Some days I found myself bargaining with God. "If I lose 10 pounds, will you help this project succeed?" Other days I questioned whether this physical journey had any spiritual value at all. Was I just replacing one form of self-focus with another? 3 months into my journey, I hit a wall. The initial 20-pound weight loss had stalled. My walks, though longer now, felt mechanical rather than purposeful. The project at work was behind schedule, and Dave's pointed comments about my gym obsession were getting harder to ignore. That Saturday morning, I almost skipped Jake's soccer game. Again, not because I couldn't walk to the bleachers this time, but because I felt like a failure on all fronts. But I went, and God had other plans. It was a crisp October morning, the kind that makes Texas feel almost civilized. I arrived early, having walked the half-mile to the field, something that would have been unthinkable 3 months ago. As I stood there watching Jake warm up, a familiar voice caught my attention. "Brother Marcus." It was James, my accountability partner, with his teenage daughter at his side. "Didn't know your son played for the Dragons. My Rachel's reffing today." He gestured to his daughter, who was doing her own warm-up routine. As we talked, James shared something that changed everything. "You know," he said, watching Rachel, 3 years ago, I couldn't even come to her games, was too ashamed. Divorced dad who couldn't keep up with his own kid. But God didn't just want me healthy for me, He wanted me healthy for her. His words hit me like a thunderbolt. The game began, and for the first time, I really watched Jake play. Not just the goals or the scores, but his movement, his energy, his joy. In the middle of the second half, he took a hard fall. Before I knew what I was doing, I was on my feet and jogging onto the field. Not walking, not lumbering, but jogging. The realization struck me mid-stride. I wasn't out of breath. My knees weren't screaming. I reached my son, helped him up, and in that moment, as he gave me a quick, fierce hug before running back to his position, I felt it. Pure, unadulterated gratitude. Right there on the soccer field, I had my first real conversation with God in years. No bargaining, no promises, no requests. Just thank you. Thank you for this body that could now move to help my son. Thank you for this strength that was never about the number on a scale. Thank you for showing me that health wasn't the goal. It was the tool for something much bigger. After the game, which the Dragons won, Jake asked me something that brought tears to my eyes. "Dad, do you think you could teach me to run? Like, proper running? Coach says it would help my game." 6 months ago, this question would have shamed me. Today, it felt like a gift. The changes after that soccer game weren't just physical, they were transformational. Jake and I started running together 3 mornings a week, starting with simple intervals, 1 minute running, 2 minutes walking. Those morning runs became sacred time. Between breaths, he'd tell me about school, his friends, his dreams. I learned more about my son in those running intervals than I had in years of sitting on the couch. At Temple Builders, my story sparked something. Pastor Mike asked me to share my soccer field moment with the group. "Sometimes," he said, "we focus so much on what we're running from, we forget what we're running toward." My vulnerability opened floodgates. Others began sharing their own stories, not just about weight loss or fitness goals, but about reconnecting with their families, finding purpose, rediscovering joy in movement as a gift from God. The office dynamics shifted too. Dave's attitude changed when he noticed my increased productivity. "Whatever you're doing," he said one day, "it's working. You're more focused, more efficient." He was right. Without the energy crashes from sugar and caffeine, my coding was sharper. I started organizing walking meetings, and to my surprise, other team members joined in. Our project discussions became more creative, more energized. Sarah noticed the biggest change at home. "You're present," she said one evening, as I helped Emma with her science project instead of zoning out in front of the TV. "Not just here physically, really present." She was right. My energy wasn't just about physical stamina anymore. It was about being fully engaged in each moment, each relationship, each opportunity to be the husband and father God was calling me to be. 8 months into my journey, Pastor Mike presented me with a challenge that seemed impossible, leading a beginner's running group at Temple Builders. "You've got a testimony that's still being written," he said. "People need to see that, not just the finish line, but the middle of the race." My first group consisted of 5 nervous newcomers, each carrying their own stories of defeat and hope. Among them was Brother Tim, who reminded me so much of myself from a year ago that it was almost painful to watch. Overweight, embarrassed, but desperately wanting change for his family. When he had to stop every few minutes during our first walk, I saw the shame in his eyes, the same shame I'd carried for so long. You know what this reminds me of? I told him, as we caught our breath. Teaching my kids to ride bikes. You fall, you get up, you go a little further each time. God's not counting our steps or our stops. He's celebrating our willingness to move forward. The look of relief on his face reminded me how much I needed to hear those same words months ago. The weight continued to come off, but that became secondary to the joy of movement and mentorship. I was down 85 pounds when Emma made an announcement at dinner that brought me to tears. Dad, I signed up for the school track team. I want to be a runner like you. Like you. Words I never thought I'd hear associated with anything athletic. My running partnership with Jake evolved too. Our morning runs got longer, our conversations deeper. One morning, as we reached the 3-mile mark, a distance that once seemed impossible, he asked, Dad, do you think God cares about running? I thought about it, remembered my own journey, and replied, I think God cares about anything that brings his children closer to him and to each other. The project at work finally launched ahead of schedule. Dave pulled me aside after the celebration meeting. Remember when I said your health kick would hurt the team, he admitted, looking sheepish. I was wrong. Half the dev team is doing walking meetings now and sick days are down 30%. You started something here, Marcus. But the real growth wasn't in the miles logged or the pounds lost. It was in the quiet moments, being able to kneel comfortably during prayer, having the energy to serve at church events, playing soccer with Jake in the backyard without counting the minutes until I could stop. My prayers changed too. Instead of asking God for specific outcomes, I found myself thanking him for the daily strength to keep moving forward, for the opportunity to be a living testimony of his transformative power. The idea came from Jake during one of our morning runs. Dad, you know what would be awesome? If you ran the Houston Marathon, you're already doing 10 miles with your Temple Builders group. He said it so casually, as if suggesting we try a new breakfast spot. A marathon, 26.2 miles. The thought both terrified and excited me. That evening I shared the idea with Pastor Mike after our Temple Builders session. His face lit up. Marcus, remember when you could barely walk to your son's soccer game? God's been preparing you for something bigger than you imagined. But here's the real question. Why would you run it? The answer came to me instantly. To show my kids that with God, nothing is impossible. To show others in our group that their journey doesn't have to stop at good enough. Pastor Mike nodded, then dropped another bombshell. The marathon is 6 months away. If you're in, I'm in. We'll train together. The preparation was intense. Early morning long runs that started before dawn. New challenges like energy gels, hydration strategies, and recovery techniques. Sarah adapted our family meals to support the training. Emma made a training calendar for the fridge, decorating each milestone with stickers. Jake joined me for the shorter runs, acting as my unofficial coach. The Temple Builders group rallied around the goal. Brother Tim, now 40 pounds lighter himself, organized a support team for the race day. Other members committed to showing up at different mile markers with encouragement and water. What started as a personal challenge was becoming a community testament to God's faithfulness. But 3 weeks before the marathon, doubt crept in. During an 18-mile training run, my old knee injury flared up. The pain was sharp, impossible to ignore. As I limped the last 2 miles home, Satan's whispers were loud. You're not a runner. You're still that lazy dad. You're going to fail publicly, disappoint everyone. For the first time in months, I felt the old shame threatening to return. Marathon morning dawned clear and cool. Perfect running weather, Pastor Mike said. My knee, while better after 2 weeks of rest and physical therapy, still didn't feel 100%. As I stood among thousands of runners at the starting line, I felt small again, out of place. But this time, I wasn't alone. Sarah, Jake, and Emma had positioned themselves at different points along the course. The Temple Builders group had organized a prayer chain, with members stationed every few miles. Even Dave from work had shown up with several team members, holding a sign that read, "Run the race with perseverance, Hebrews 12:1. The first 13 miles felt strong, almost easy. I high-fived Emma at mile 6, her excited screams giving me an extra burst of energy. Jake joined me for a quarter mile at the halfway point, matching my pace and updating me on who was waiting ahead. Sarah's smile at mile 15 carried me through the next 3 miles. Then mile 19 hit, the dreaded wall. My knee began to throb, each step sending sharp pains up my leg. The doubt returned, stronger than ever. I slowed to a walk, fighting back tears of frustration. That's when I heard it, Brother Tim's voice. "Remember what you told me, Marcus. God's not counting our steps or our stops." The entire temple builders group had gathered at mile 20, forming a tunnel of encouragement. As I walked through them, they began to pray, not for my knee, not for my finish, but in thanksgiving for how far God had brought me. Pastor Mike fell into step beside me, and together we established a new rhythm. Run 3 minutes, walk 1 minute, pray continuously. The last 6.2 miles were a blur of pain, prayer, and persistence. Every step was a choice between giving up and going forward. But something had changed. The pain was no longer my enemy. It was part of my testimony. Each step whispered, "This is what it means to trust God beyond your own strength." Jake appeared at mile 25, running beside me just as he had all those months ago. But this time, I wasn't gasping for air. This time, we ran together, father and son, steady and strong. As we approached the finish line, I saw them, Emma and Sarah, jumping and cheering. Behind them stood a group from church, including several temple builders members who had started their own journeys inspired by mine. Crossing that finish line wasn't just about completing 26.2 miles. It was about crossing over from who I was to who God had shaped me to become. The marathon medal they placed around my neck meant far less than Emma's fierce hug and her words. "Dad, you're my hero." Jake, trying to play it cool but failing to hide his tears, simply said, "I knew you could do it, Dad. I always knew." That marathon was 2 years ago. Since then, I've run 3 more, each one a testimony to God's faithfulness. But the real victory isn't in the races I've finished, it's in the lives that have been changed, starting with my own family. Jake made varsity soccer this year, and we still run together 3 mornings a week. These days, he's the one waiting for me to catch up, but neither of us minds. Emma's not only on the track team, but mentors younger runners, sharing what she learned from watching her dad start from zero. Sarah has started her own wellness journey, joining temple builders and discovering her own path to physical and spiritual health. The group at church has grown from our original handful to over 50 members. We've expanded beyond running to include various forms of exercise, but our core message remains the same. Our bodies are temples, and how we care for them is an act of worship. Brother Tim, who once couldn't walk a block without stopping, just completed his first half marathon. At work, our team's culture has transformed. Walking meetings are now the norm, and we've even started a corporate wellness program. Dave jokes that I should add fitness evangelist to my job title, but he's the one who signed up for his first 5K last month. I still keep that photo in my office, the one of me at my heaviest sitting on the couch while life passed by, not as a reminder of shame, but as a testament to God's transformative power. When people ask me how I lost the weight or how I became a runner, I tell them the truth. It started with a painful question from my daughter and a desperate prayer in my office. But it became something far greater, a journey of learning that with God, our greatest limitations can become platforms for His glory. Next month, Jake and I are running our first marathon together. Emma's training for her first half marathon, and Sarah's leading a new women's walking group at church. Our family motto has become, "Moving forward in faith." The journey never really ends. It just keeps opening new paths to explore and more lives to touch. Your journey starts with a single step, not just physical, but spiritual. If you're struggling with addiction, questioning your faith, or wondering if God can use you, know that He can transform any life, any workplace, any situation. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message of hope. Have your own story of transformation. Share it in the comments below. Your testimony might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.